From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Hi, I'm Riley Lyons, and here are your news and sports updates for 12 p.m. An Amber Alert has been canceled as a young boy who was taken from the Children's Hospital by his mother was found near Calgary. The mother posted a video on YouTube describing the events leading up to the Amber Alert. The mother, Willow Skies, said her son had come down with a bacterial infection over the weekend. After returning for the boy's second checkup, Skies claimed that the health officials threatened to take her son from her if she refused further medical treatment. Late Sunday night, the mother took her son from the Children's Hospital. The mother has been arrested since then and started a GoFundMe which has raised over $7,000 today alone. It's Science Literacy Week across all of Canada. Gurpreet Gambo has more.
Schools, libraries, and others across the country are promoting being science literate this week. BCIT's own campus library is one of them. This year's theme is mathematics. BCIT librarian Deirdre Grace said that it's important because of the misinformation that spreads easily on social media. She also said having some math knowledge is important in day-to-day life. The library is celebrating the week by highlighting math-related books and films, like the Oscar-winning Hidden Figures, and events happening all week on campus. There will also be a math puzzle posted daily to the library's Instagram account. Gurpreet Gambo, 1680 The Crow.
A sentence hearing for a Dutch man was expected to proceed today, but has been delayed. A BC Supreme Court jury convicted Aidan Coben guilty last month of extortion, harassment, and communication with a young person to commit sexual offense. The hearing was supposed to happen today to determine Coben's sentence after he was extradited from the Netherlands. The sentence hearing has been delayed after the prosecutor testing positive for COVID-19. Carol Todd, the mother of the teenage victim, was expected to give a victim statement today, and the hearing will be postponed to October 11th. The campfire ban is set to be lifted today at noon for the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island's residents. Reporter Mac Fleet has the latest.
The Coastal Fire Center is lifting the campfire ban that has been in place since August 4th. Julia Caranci, a fire information officer for the Coastal Fire Center, expressed what she wants to see out of the campers.
What we really want to stress this year and every year is that we want people to see having a campfire, as more of a responsibility as opposed to a right. So that means we want everybody out there to really be careful, cautious, and conscientious when they're having a campfire.
Caranci also spoke about a lot of the fires this year were actually caused by lightning as opposed to people, and that went into their consideration when lifting the ban. Mac Fleet, 1680, The Crow.
And we are now joined by Mac Fleet. So, Mac, does the Coastal Fire Center not think that it's too soon to lift the ban, considering that the Hope Forest fires just got put to a held status?
Well, Riley, with the rain that the coast has received in recent weeks, and with the temperature continuing to drop, the Coastal Fire Center does feel good about the announcement.
What lasting impressions did you have after your talk with Caranci?
Just be smart. She really emphasized fire safety and gave out reminders such as do not leave your fire unattended, and that when you are done with the fire, that you put it out and make sure the coals are cool to the touch.
Thanks so much, Mac. A new study from the Financial Wellness Lab of Canada shows that the financial well-being of Canadian workers has declined in the past year. John Kennedy has more.
The study, which combines the National Payroll Institute's annual survey with analysis by the Financial Wellness Lab of Canada, found the number of people living paycheck to paycheck increased by 26% in 2022 compared to last year. The analysis included a look at the financial clusters Canadians could fall into, comfortable, coping, or stressed, and showed the gap has widened between those coping and stressed. While those with lower household incomes were likely to be stressed, 41% in the stressed category reported an annual household income in excess of $100,000. John Kennedy, The Canadian Press, Toronto.
The Regina Police Service says 2 men are facing explosives and firearms charges after an incident on Monday. A business on Broad Street reported around 8 a.m. that there was a man trying to steal items. The complainant told the men to leave. The man responded by showing a knife and headed into a nearby alleyway with another man. Police were contacted and detained both men. Officers stated that the men had a knife, a hatchet, and 2 improvised incendiary devices. Both men were under conditions to not be in property of explosives or ammunition. Health Minister Jean-Yves Duclos started a parliament session with the new dental care legislation. He says the new legislation would provide families with children under 12 with $650 per child each year for dental services.
Our government will be taking the necessary steps to build a comprehensive, longer-term dental care program. We are continuing to engage for that purpose with a broad range of experts, professionals in the field, provinces and territories, and parliamentarians of all stripes as we develop a long-term Canadian dental care program.
Families with household income under $90,000 need to provide a licensed dental practitioner and the month of planned appointments. Duclos says that this is just a start for the dental legislation. Californians are getting a new method of how they want their bodies to be disposed after death. Alex Stone has more.
Human composting will be allowed here in California beginning in 2027. It's part of a new bill signed into law allowing human remains to naturally decompose over about 2 months and the body is turned into soil. The soil is then returned to the family. Assemblywoman Cristina Garcia introduced the bill and says it helps the environment.
We have a coffin and we put that into the ground. There's a lot of chemicals that get leached into the ground and that oftentimes ends up in our water.
But groups like the California Catholic Conference are against human composting because it says there is a lack of dignity toward the human body. Alex Stone, ABC News, Los Angeles.
Russian-controlled regions in eastern and southern Ukraine announced plans to hold a vote to separate to Russia. Charles de Ledesma has more.
The concerted and quickening Kremlin-backed efforts to swallow up 4 regions could set the stage for Moscow to escalate the war against Ukrainian forces successfully battling to wrest back territory. The announcements of referendums starting on Friday in the Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson and partly Russian-controlled Zaporizhia regions come after a close ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin says votes are needed as Moscow loses ground in the war that began nearly 7 months ago. I'm Charles de Ledesma.
Hurricane Fiona slammed through Puerto Rico on Monday, knocking out the power grid. Some Puerto Ricans could go days without power. Victor Oquendo has more.
The power grid never did recover after Hurricane Maria, and then there were also a series of earthquakes in 2020 that also did damage to the grid. So this has been a work in progress, to say the least. The Puerto Rican people are fed up with this. There is a new company. It's called Luma Energy. They're in charge of operating the grid and fixing it. But in speaking with the Puerto Rican people before Fiona arrived, they all told me they fully expected to lose power. And sure enough, that's what happened.
And now for your sports headlines. Hockey player PK Subban announced his retirement from the NHL after 13 seasons with the league. He was drafted into the Montreal Canadiens in 2007, and PK Subban spent his first 7 seasons here. Subban won the Norris Trophy in 2013 as a top defenseman. He signed an 8-year, $72 million contract extension with the Canadiens in 2015, but was traded to the Nashville Predators before the contract kicked in. PK Subban got an emotional tribute from the Canadiens at Bell Center when he returned as a Nashville Predator. Another legendary defenseman is also retiring. Zdeno Chara, the giant on the Bruins, will be leaving the NHL. The 6'9" defenseman made a huge impact on the game and the Bruins after 24 seasons. He stated on his Instagram that he signed a 1-day contract with the Bruins to officially end his career. The NHL gave Chara special dispensation for his specially long stick due to his 6'9" frame. The Colorado Avalanche are making Nathan MacKinnon the highest-paid NHL player with a new contract. The contract is an 8-year package that is worth $100.8 million. His $12.6 million salary cap will go into effect at the start of the 2023-2024 season. This contract surpasses Connor McDavid's current contract with the Edmonton Oilers that's valued at $100 million over 8 years, or $12.5 million. McKinnon has accepted this deal right prior to the start of the training camp. Colorado Avalanche are coming off of their Stanley Cup win last season, and Avalanche GM Chris McFarland says he has that rare combination of speed and power with a high compete level that makes him a generational player. And now for your weather up. Those are your news and sports headlines for 9 a.m. I'm Riley Lyons. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.
podcast companion call on 1680 The Crow. I'm your host, Astapandi Kanan, with my producer, Mac Fleet. Today I'm joined by two very special guests who are here to talk about something that can be quite hard for many to talk about. We often talk about how diverse Canada is. You know, I wholeheartedly believe that diversity is one of the biggest strengths that we have in this country. However, recently there have been many instances where minority groups have been subjected to hate crimes. Just last week, members of the BC Muslim community called for a more concrete action to address Islamophobia in our province and in Canada. And Stats Canada has actually revealed that Arabs and West Asians, from 2020 to 2021, there's been a 46% increase in hate crimes towards them. And specifically, a 71% increase in anti-Muslim hate crime between 2020 to 2021. And today, I actually have Bassam Abunadi, the director at Reclaim, a grassroots organization that works with educational institutions to address and combat Islamophobia. And I have Shane Hashmi, who volunteers with Aspire, a project by a Muslim food bank here to assist new immigrants and refugees in Canada. Shane is also a former member of the Langley Muslim Association before he moved to Surrey. So thank you, Bassam and Shane, for being here with us today.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, it's our honor to have you to talk about something that, you know, not many people like to talk about. So I'm just going to go right into it. What is your reaction when you hear about anti-Muslim hate crime? Like, what is your first reaction?
Well, I hope that my reaction is the same as everybody else's reaction. If we take the premise that Muslims are an integral part of the Canadian mosaic and that we are a part of the Canadian family, then my hope is that all Canadians are alarmed when they hear that any of their neighbors are being attacked because of their faith or because of their outward expression of their faith. Now, of course, being a member of the community, I do get to experience the lingering fear that sticks around when the cameras have gone. All Muslims that I know and that I speak with are worried about the next attack, whether in their places of worship or in their homes or when their wives and their daughters and their sons are walking to school or walking to work or walking to the bus. There is a palpable sense of discomfort and fear.
Yeah. Shane, how about you? Have recent events made you scared? How do you feel?
Yes, I feel about the same as Suad mentioned, and we have experienced similar circumstances. Most recently in Langley, well, that was about a year and a half ago. During Ramadan, there was a break-in in our Masala, that small mosque. And then recently in Surrey, when I moved to Surrey a few months ago, I was told, actually it was during Ramadan as well, when there was some graffitiing around the masjid area. And also there was an attack on some Muslims who were returning from the late night prayer. So a guy in a car was like threatening to overrun them. So that was a very big eye-opener for us. So then we interacted with the local police and informed them, and they informed us that they will be there to assist whenever there's a problem. But again, like Suad mentioned, there's a sense of discomfort among the Muslim community, especially when Ramadan time comes, and these kind of concerns, they arise because a lot of Muslims, they go to the mosques and then they get to experience these kind of unpleasant experiences.
Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think it's prevalent in Canada? Like, why does that happen in your community?
Well, it's to look at it holistically, I think it's I would blame the media to some extent, unfortunately, because Muslims are portrayed as they do these actions because of their faith, which is absolutely incorrect. So they need to be educated. The media needs to be educated, and also guided on how to present news when certain kind of news they occur.
Right. Bassam, did you have anything?
Yeah, I have a slightly different take on that. And I'll try to be concise. So here goes. Nations, as we understand them, are essentially, at their very core, stories. They are carefully curated collections of facts that are put together in nice, neat packages and delivered through standardized education systems. That's essentially what a national story is. And the national stories are manifested in public institutions, the police, even something as innocuous as your public mail service, centers of learning. This is essentially how a nation state functions. It's the most popular and successful political model in the world. Canada has a very poor sense of itself relative to almost every other nation state that I've studied, looked at, read about. Canada has a very, very loose idea of what it is. And there are a ton of PhDs written about this, what it means to be Canadian. The opportunity that presents is it allows Canadians to continuously retell their story and to re-explore what it means to be Canadian. And on the most superficial level, this is a great time to be a Muslim because we're able to tell the story of Canada with ourselves in it. And because the Canadian story is so fluid and so open, we have an opportunity to do that in a way that Muslims in a lot of other countries, and not just Muslims, but other minorities in a lot of other countries just wouldn't be allotted that opportunity. It's just not possible. The pushback to that, though, or the flip side to that, is that people who are attached to a particular idea of Canada, however vague, however loosely defined, people who are very attached to that vision of Canada, when they're seeing hijabis on billboards and when they're seeing a cabinet that looks nothing like the Canada that they have in mind, they will push back, and they will push back hard. And so I think what you're seeing is a competition over what the idea of Canada actually is.
Oh, wow. Do you have anything to add to this, Shane?
Yes, I think so. I'd address the, probably I would call it the root cause. So it stems from right where it starts, actually, educational institutions and departments as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm, as a local Muslim, a member of the community, what I experienced, so I recollected that and informed you about it. But I agree with Suad that there needs to be done, something needs to be done to address this at the root level.
Right. I have a quick question for you, Shane. You brought up the media. What do you think the media can do differently? What would you like us to do differently to help eradicate Islamophobia?
Right. I think first thing they should stop using the term like Islamists or Islamic terrorists. I mean, they're actually linking terrorism to the faith. And I mean, if you look at it, if some non-Muslims does a similar act, then no one calls that person a Christian terrorist or so and so. So that I believe is unfair. So that should be those terms should be avoided. Mm-hmm. And people get crazy; they do crazy things, but shouldn't be linked with their faith. That's what I believe.
Right, 100%. And Bassam, I know that you work at Reclaim. You work with students, you work with schools and districts. So can you tell us a little bit about how you're working towards, eradicating or combating anti-Muslim bigotry?
Sure. So a big part of what we do is to help educators transform Muslims into the protagonists in their own stories rather than the antagonist or the extra in somebody else's story. Now, what does that actually mean? It means celebrating Muslims and their history and their experiences in the way that they genuinely experience the world, in the way that they actually see themselves and the way that they actually see the world, even if that means, and this part is very important, even in a classroom where the way that Muslims may remember something is radically different and potentially uncomfortable for other people in the classroom. A classroom, especially one filled with children, should be respectful to everyone. It should be comfortable, or it should be tolerant of everyone. But a classroom is also a place where you could challenge certain normative truths or certain beliefs or certain narratives. You want to talk about a timely launch point here. There's perhaps no better example I've ever seen in my life of how one group of people experience an event and a person and have a memory about something, and another people experience an event and a memory about something than the death of the Queen. If you have a large, if you're all over social media, then you saw something akin to a Canadian schizophrenia, where one group are posting eulogies and a whole bunch of other subaltern groups are basically posting memes, right? And so how did we arrive at that? Now, of course, I do really need to reiterate the importance of being respectful and courteous and mindful of everyone who's around you. But the point that I'm trying to make is that there are people in your classroom, there are people in your lecture halls who have a completely different memory of events of the past. And if they want to feel like they are part of the classroom, that they are part of the lecture hall, and they are subsequently part of that institution and that country and that place and that neighborhood, then they need to be able to share their stories.
I have a rather personal question for you guys. I'm married to a Palestinian Muslim man, and one of the things he said to me really stuck with me, and he said, Asta, there are some times that I don't introduce myself as a Palestinian Muslim. I just avoid the topic altogether because I know how a person's going to look at me. Have you been in that situation? Have you caught yourself in a place where you're not able to, Shane, let's start with that you're not able to say who you are?
No, I feel happy with what I am, with my faith, so I don't have any problem expressing myself and declaring myself as a Muslim, and so I don't have any such fears. Some people may have when they're pushed to a certain situation, so maybe I haven't been in such a situation where I had to do that, but I'm pretty confident that I don't have any problem expressing myself, so yes.
Yeah, I love that for you. Yeah.
I also happen to be a Muslim and a Palestinian, incidentally enough, and that was not planned, but here we are. While I do not have that exact sentiment, what I could say from experience is that sometimes being a Palestinian and being a Muslim is tiring. I work in this space. I talk about these things all the time. That doesn't mean I always feel like it, though. So sometimes, while I can't say that I do exactly what your husband described, sometimes I hear things that I decide not to address just because I don't have the energy for it. There are times where I just want to be watching MMA, where I just want to be, reading my book in the park, where I just want to be looking after my kids, and I don't want to get into a long political conversation with the people talking about Mideast politics. Now, I should say that more often than not, I do get involved, but sometimes I choose to ignore it because it's tiring.
Right. Yeah. Shane, can you talk a little bit about Aspire and what you guys do as a non-for-profit organization?
Yes, not-for-profit organization, and it's being run by a Muslim food bank that, as the name says, that it distributes food to the needy. So they initiated a project about 6 years ago when the Syrian refugees started coming in. So they invited volunteers to come and help and basically teach them English and help them get settled in the society. So I participated in that back 6 years ago. And then most recently, more refugees started coming in, especially from Afghanistan. So I'm doing a similar role, involved in a similar role now as well, helping them get settled here. They're looking at their basic needs, what they need, for example, language problem or well, I would say the ones that I've been dealing with, they're very good. They know English. But the other issues like settling down and finding a doctor and then getting their resume up to date and according to Canadian standards, so things like that.
Have you faced any difficulties, or have the refugees who've come in or faced any difficulties being Muslim, or just, with the cultural shock here?
Right. Well, understandably so. There is some cultural shock, but I haven't heard any complaints about being targeted for being a Muslim. So fortunately, they get to mix up with their local communities, Muslim communities, so they get comfortable, and we also help them in doing that. And then gradually, our job is to just get them helped into some point, and then after that we close the case and then move on to the next, because there are a lot of cases that we have to deal with.
Right, yeah. Bassam, can you talk a little bit about what else you do with Reclaim, in at least what are you doing in your capacity to, eradicate or combat?
I should say that a significant amount of my energy and time is actually spent speaking to the Muslim community. Okay. So I don't know if the listeners know this, but October is officially recognized in Canada as Islamic History Month. And for most Muslims, Canadian Muslims and non-Canadian Muslims, this is kind of a blanket statement, they have a very vague understanding of their own past. Now, that's rooted in two forces. One is being subjected to the rule of the most Islamophobic regimes on earth who rule the modern Muslim world, but also centuries of colonialism. And so the average Muslim will have a somewhat familiar understanding of like the prophetic age and early Islamic history. And then there's this giant black hole, and then there's modern lived experience, and everything in between is a blur. So I spend a lot of time speaking with Muslims just about the stories of the Islamic world. The purpose of this is to equip Canadian Muslims with a dignified version of their own past. That's not to say that I aim to provide them with a fantastical version of their past, because I think it's very important to be historically accurate and to be honest. But I want Muslims to be able to look at their own past and see that we did contribute to the human story. We were part of the human experience, and we were not just subjects of somebody else. Right. Again, to transform Muslims into the protagonists in their stories.
I understand what you mean by transforming Muslims to the protagonists. Is that something based off of like self or internalized racism? Is that what you're combating, or am I understanding that wrong?
No, absolutely. Mm-hmm. So if you most of it, we spoke off air a bit, but in addition to the work that I do, I also have a podcast on Palestinian history, which is called Preoccupation. And if you read books about Palestine that were written before, let's say like 1960, even if they were written by Palestinians, they were overwhelmingly relying on colonial sources. Right. Even if they were trying to give like an honest account of their own history. So there's a lot of work. I don't just want to say to be undone. Maybe that's not fair, but there are a lot of stories that we have not explored yet, and that's what I'm trying to do.
Okay. Mm-hmm. I want to ask both of you more about your own lived experiences. I know we're talking about how to eradicate what happens, hate crimes, but in your own specific experiences, what is it to have a Muslim identity? Who are you? Like, what is it to you to be Muslim?
Well, living in Canada is different. I lived in Pakistan as well for about 25 years. So being in a Muslim country is totally different. Living in a non-Muslim country is different. But with time, there are more and more Muslims coming to Canada. So that's making a difference, in my opinion. We have a lot of mosques here and there, and there are Muslim schools. And but then there is a fear in the back of the mind. Like my wife wears a hijab. So initially when she used to go to work, I was very worried, because there were incidences happening those days. But with time, she gets a lot of respect at work, so she doesn't have any issues. But in the back of my mind, used to be, but now I'm okay because maybe because of time has passed and then nothing has happened, nothing bad has happened, thankfully. And so it's not. I won't say it's not. I haven't experienced anything with lucky as well, and neither in my friends. But when we hear about incidences like during Ramadan, as I mentioned, those incidences they're disturbing. They're disturbing, right? Because that can happen to anyone. I also go for late night prayers during Ramadan, so sometimes when a car is passing by and I'm all alone on the road, I do tend to just be careful. So there's fear in the back of my mind, but I tend to not think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sorry, I'm just going to dig a little bit deeper. How do you not think about it? How do you mask the fear?
Well, by remembering Creator, because He controls our destiny, right? When we die, when we live. So that's if you have that faith, then you tend to just trust in Him, in the Creator.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Bassam?
If I've understood the question correctly, it's how do I understand or how would I explain what a Muslim identity is like?
Your specific Muslim identity.
For myself, and if I was put in, as I am at this moment, of explaining what it feels like to be a Muslim, what I think is really important for a non-Muslim audience to understand is that modern Muslims carry with them numerous, sometimes complementary, but often conflicting collective identities. So while Muslim is one identity and a very, very, very important one that I carry, it's also colored by a bunch of other identities that I have. And I'll illustrate this with just like the simplest story that I can. And I've told it a few times and I think it captures it quite well. One of my neighbors asked me 2 summers ago, Bassam, where are you from? And I said, I'm Palestinian. And she said, oh, that's like our other neighbor, but she's from Jordan. And I said, no, actually, she's also Palestinian. She's from Nablus, and I'm from Jaffa. These are towns in Palestine. Mm-hmm. She said, but she told me she's Jordanian. I said, well, I'm also Jordanian. And she looked at me like I was speaking Russian, like she had no idea what I... And then she said, but she told me that she was born in the Emirates, so doesn't that make her Emirati, like from the Emirates? I said, no, and I was born in Saudi Arabia. And she said, oh, so you're Saudi Arabian. I said, no, I'm Palestinian. And I can assure you, first of all, I wasn't trying to be difficult. I was chasing after my daughter at the time. But she had no idea what I was talking about. Now, those things, the question, just the question, if I'm in a taxi in Jordan and the taxi driver asks me, where are you from the context of the question, I understand if he's asking me, where are you from in the world? Like, where do you reside? Because there's something off about your accent. Or where do you live in Jordan? Or where are you from originally? I know which one they're trying to ask, and it's a historian who I have a great relationship with named Michael Province, and in his writing about the Syrian civil war, not the current one, sorry, about the Syrian uprising in 1925, he said that there was one Syria, but there were many Syrian nationalisms. Right? Every Muslim carries with themselves a family identity, a tribal identity, a linguistic identity, a regional identity, and so, of course, I understand that for a non-Muslim audience, this can be very confusing. Every single one of those identities, though, touches on Islam and specifically the personality of the Prophet ﷺ in some way, shape, or form. Political legitimacy in the Palestinian experience was often tied to which families are actually descended from the prophetic lineage. And anyways, I could go on and on about that. But this is something that I think... I strive to explain to non-Muslim audiences that it's not just one, there's not just one identity that person in front of you is carrying with them.
Right, 100%. In the interest of time, unfortunately, I do have to wrap up today, but is there anything else you'd like to leave us and your audience, your non-Muslim audience with?
No, I think everyone knows what kind of citizen they're supposed to be. So I would say just be that citizen and respect other people's faith and their identities, and then we also respect everyone and their identities. So yeah, and then just be a vibrant community.
Yeah, 100%.
I grew up watching my dad yell at the TV.
Peter Percival knew his dream job would be firefighting since elementary school. Even though after graduation he put it on the back burner to do construction, he eventually came back to the dream, got certified in Texas, and now works for the Surrey Fire Department. Besides being a fighter, Peter has a side hobby of fishing and creating fishing reels. Doing things with fishing helps Peter cast away the stress of the job.
You know, it's just a relief for me, right? Fishing is, I find though that it gets harder and harder to drive an hour and a half, 2 hours to go fishing sometimes, right? I like to set up at the lake for a week and just relax, right? By the fire, fish a little bit and relax. So yeah, it's all an avenue to release stress.
Peter has always had a long history with fishing growing up, from the Mill Lake Fishing Derby to family trips. But it wasn't until later in life, when a family member asked to go fishing, that things really changed.
And then he said, "Do you want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds like fun." And then boom, I was hooked, right? Like we would go twice a weekend, right? And I remember hiking into that limit hole and running out of leaders and not knowing how to tie our own, driving back to Fred's, driving back to the limit hole, hiking back in there. Come a long ways. Yeah, that's how salmon fishing started for me, right?
Aside from fishing, Peter now creates fishing reels with his father-in-law out of their garage. The story of how that started is kind of an interesting one.
My father-in-law is a machinist, and he's a very smart man. He's born in Germany, trained in Germany, and he has a machine in his garage. So we went on a camping trip, kind of a family camping trip, which is a long story because it kind of, fish and family tend to stink after 3 days. Anyways, we went on a camping trip. And I brought a Islander reel with me, right, which is made on Vancouver Island. And we took it apart on the picnic table just outside of Alaska and kind of looked at how it was built and thought, he kind of looked at the design and figured, I could probably do this. And that's how it all started, right, is on a picnic table just outside, I guess it would have been more outside of the Yukon. He has a CNC machine, which is a computerized machine. It's 1985, so it's pretty old and antiquated. But he's a wizard on it. It's got a little screen on it. I don't know, maybe 10 inches by 10 inches, and it's green and black, right? So, and then he's got the mill or the lathe, right, to turn different parts and to buff things and he does his own anodizing too, which colors the parts different colors. So he's not afraid to try something or do something, which a lot of times I find that fear holds me back. I'm like, oh man, I don't know if I want to do that, and then you just have to sometimes jump in, right, and say like, I'm going to do it and I'm going to just battle through it and it'll work, right?
I asked Peter what he thought of the decline in fish population, and he's noticed a big drop-off in just a short span of time.
The percentage of fish, I mean, it's hard because I don't fish the way I used to, right? I feel like, we used to catch way more fish and fish all day long, but I put a lot more time in on the rivers, right? I don't think it'll run dry, but if you look at the sockeye, you can only fish every 4 years now, right? And then it's like a question mark, like, are they going to open it? Springs, they've had closed on the Fraser for numerous years, so I don't think that the river will be like, oh, the river's void of life. It'll be like, you're not allowed to fish it. That would be not a very good day. But look at what's happened on the Fraser, right? So we'll go from there.
John Reynolds, the chair of aquatic conservation, reminded me that not all of the 5 BC salmon species are necessarily in danger, but some are in trouble. The worst off in southern BC are Chinook and sockeye salmon.
Really gotten into quite a bit of trouble to the point where the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada, which I happen to be the chair of, has actually recommended to the federal government that they could be at risk of extinction.
A big issue that John and Peter agree on is commercial fishing when it comes to the population of fish. John is appreciative of what the government has put in place to save the fish.
A lot of recreational fishing is fairly well guided by the Department of Fisheries and Oceans rules. And so if people fish responsibly and look after the fish, if they're putting them back, it certainly wouldn't be in my top list of problems.
I know what John said does sound really bad, but he does believe that the waters won't run dry of fish if people do things properly.
Well, I certainly support the decisions that have been made about reducing commercial fisheries for many species. That is often the easiest thing to do, I must admit, and because the salmon have such complicated life cycles, living in so many different places at different times, that it's hard to do much for them when they're in the ocean, especially when they're juveniles. They're not being caught in fisheries, and they're basically going to live or die according to the amount of food they have and the predators. So the control of commercial fisheries has, in general, been, I think, quite well done.
The last note from John is he wants us to remember to go support local organizations that help better the population of fish, because it's not just the government that makes the changes, so do we. I'm Kiara Collins with co-producer Mac Fleet with 1680 The Crow.
A motorcycle mechanic, Paige Everden, and her mentor tell the story of what it's like being a woman in an industry dominated 90% by men.
Maybe it's like a bit of a rebellious thing for me. Like when people tell me I can't do things, like I want to prove them wrong. Maybe also like I just got used to being told that I couldn't do things because I was a woman growing up, and then I just sort of realized that that wasn't true or right, and like kind of decided that I wanted to be a person that fought those things. My name is Paige Everden, and I am a motorcycle mechanic. I work at a shop called True Grit.
Sitting in front of me now with dirt and oil stains on her face and clothes is Paige Everden, who has been at BCIT for the last almost 2 years and is working on getting an education to support her dreams and aspirations of working in motorcycle mechanics and metal fabrication.
I took the motorcycle mechanics course and graduated that. And then I applied and got into the Metal Fabricator Foundations course. I did it because I want to do custom work on bikes. And when you're a metal fabricator, you can make bike frames, you can make gas tanks, you can make front ends, you can make you can make anything with metal.
Driving down an industrial road with lots of potholes and dust all around, we come across a large red barn, which is Rochelle Trellenberg's motorcycle mechanic shop.
Paige is great. Paige learned so fast. It just blows my mind when somebody comes in and you really see that they're really good at something just right off the hop, and she absolutely is so good at that, and she's great with people, and she shows up.
Should I just pour it? It should fit. Let me look. I mean, if it's not fitting for you.
It sucks to siphon gas, so let's try not to do that. But
both Paige and her boss Rochelle share the same dreams and aspirations towards this workforce.
But you know what? I really have this drive suddenly to go to school to be a motorcycle mechanic. Like something in me just pushed me. So I went to BCIT for during the day, and then I worked in the nights. The dream kind of just was something cool where we'd work on bikes on the side, we'd do these little hangouts, we'd show people what we learned in class, and I really thrived in that environment. It was crazy, right? So, and I posted that I would work basically for baked goods. Anybody that needed their bike fixed, anybody that needed anything having to do with their bike, if I could do it, I would basically do it for free.
At the same time, they share the same struggles and the same obstacles by being a woman in this male-led workforce.
A guy will come in and I'll go out to greet and prep, and they'll walk right past me. And I'll be like, okay. But then the men in the shop that totally support me will be like, no, she's the one you need to speak with. Like, don't even come near me. I don't really allow for the pervert or the chauvinist to come through these doors.
Like Rochelle, Paige has faced a lot of the same misogyny, especially in her classroom.
So many examples. I guess like one thing that happened quite a number of times that like stands out to me is just like the amount of times that I would walk into the room or walk up to the group and they would stop talking because obviously they were talking about something, or maybe me, and they didn't want me to hear what they were saying. And then there were times when they didn't stop talking and I overheard some of the things that they said, and it was like some pretty gnarly stuff about women, you know? And it was just like, it felt really gross. It didn't feel good to experience that kind of thing and hear it. And it just makes you feel like an outsider, you know? Like that was like the general feeling I got from being in that classroom, was just like that I wasn't fully welcome there, I guess. Not by the teacher. The teacher was amazing. Just the guys that like were obviously attracted to the class. Yeah.
And the teacher was a female, right?
That's right, yeah. They never said that kind of stuff around her. They were very careful not to.
Why don't I just dump it out then? The tank? Yeah, you can totally remove the tank. There's a bunch of wires at the bottom that need to be removed, right? So...
Regardless of the misogyny and mistreatment that both Paige and Rochelle have faced coming up in this industry, they still remain optimistic and acknowledge the fact that most of this mistreatment comes from wrongfully engraved lessons in a lot of people's minds that they simply can't change, and they don't let that stop them.
If I'm being honest, like I think that she's doing enough just by having gone into the industry like so long ago and just like existing there and like now being a teacher. I think that that's really, really good. I think that basically like you can't change things overnight, and like it's a bit too much to ask for like one teacher to try and like change the like things that everyone has learned over their entire lives.
Not all the old boys are like that, but the majority that have been in the industry for as long as they have been walking are brutal. Yeah. And they just can't come out of this habit of women are there to touch and talk dirty to, and not to have a collective conversation about what an engine needs. Yeah.
After learning about the major issues of misogyny and mistreatment in this workforce, it leaves you wondering what motivates the small percentage of women struggling to overcome these obstacles and what keeps them going.
Because fuck them. No, for real, like fuck those guys, you know? Like, because, I mean, actually, okay, like obviously it's not just spite, but like, I don't know, you can't let it slow you down.
Paige's rebellious attitude and unwillingness to back down, no matter what obstacles and struggles she faces, is truly inspiring, and she leaves us with this last piece of advice.
I would say that if a person looks at you and makes a snap decision based off of your gender or your appearance, and they decide that they don't want to listen to you, and they decide that they're not going to give you a chance because you're not like what they want to see in the industry, then don't waste your time on them. Just don't bother trying to gain their respect. The only person's respect you need is your own. And as long as you know that you can do it and you understand that like you're a capable person, then you don't have to worry about them, you know?
Riley Lyons and Maha Mashmi for 1680 The Crow.
The mainland Misfits are lacing up their skates for another bone-crunching season of roller derby, a fast-paced, full-contact sport primarily played by women. Our reporter Gurpreet Kambo, who was given the derby name Purple Rain, that's rain spelled R-E-I-G-N, joins us from Surrey.
Powerful. I like the focus it brings. So I always found like games and competitions, it's like you enter into this like, you only have one thing to think about and like that's the game.
It teaches you how to like fall down and get back up again,
repetitively, and then you can also apply
flamboyant. I think there was a lot of color, a lot of screaming, a lot of yelling, a lot more face paint, stuff like that. It was just a fun time, and it was something I'd never seen before, and I just kind of got the bug.
We became friends through Derby and at Derby, and then slowly started hanging out outside of Derby, and now, I have a lifelong friend from it.
Blue wheels, pink toe stop, and then my toe covers are purple and my laces are purple.
For me, I really enjoy just being on skates, period. So I'll skate anytime, anywhere. And then also, it's probably one of the only times in my week where I'm not thinking about work or stressing. It's a very good way to sort of disconnect and just have fun.
Two lines of 4 roller skaters, pushing and pulling against each other, like a rugby scrum if you added wheels. This chaotic jumble of arms and roller skates is what each team's jammer has to break through to score points. This is the sport of roller derby.
Pronouns are she, they. I am Barbie, she, her.
Wrecking ball,
Hooligan, she, her.
Maddie Longleg, she, her.
Sharky, she, her.
on skip, he, him. Party and Nelson, he, him.
Trill, she, her. Kendra, she, her.
You're up. What? Oh, so, right up front. Something that always is a problem.
They're lacing up at practice. We caught Frank the Tank as she was getting ready.
Okay, so I saw the movie Whip It like basically everybody else has. And then I was working at a hockey shop, and I didn't know there was a league nearby me. I thought the closest one was Vancouver, and at the time I couldn't really drive out to Vancouver to play. And when I was working at this hockey shop, this guy comes in and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna go play roller derby." I'm like, "Sorry, you're gonna what?" And basically that night was what we used to call a punch and pie, which was like an intro to roller derby and the sport itself, and like kind of a recruitment night, and I was hooked.
The sport of roller derby is slowly making its comeback after the pandemic. The Greater Vancouver Roller Derby Association is practicing right now to get back into game shape.
Generally call what we're doing right now an edging drill. So you essentially have one person that's acting as the jammer and one person that's acting as the blocker. And one person, the jammer, is trying to push the blocker to a certain point, especially for the blocker to get good at really being down in their knees and kind of, with blocking you can't stay still, you have to still be moving a little bit. So that's the main. Try again,
Derby name Bruceberry Pie. I'm 5'6". I'm plus size. I have orange hair. I've got tattoos covering my whole left arm and pretty much both my legs. And also you can't see, but underneath as well. So when I first started derby, I would fall all the time because I was a really terrible skater. So I would fall and I bruised really easy. So I would be constantly covered in bruises. And so the name just came very naturally. Yeah. I really missed it during the pandemic. One, the physical contact, but also the emotional contact that you get to be around people. It was lovely. I didn't realize how much I missed it, I think, until it got taken away, or how much I needed it. Yeah.
We're gonna do the wrap around, which was the thing that Frank demonstrated. So we're gonna come around, do a full turn into holding them essentially. Cool.
I've been around the block, you could say, yeah. And I've gotten to do the whole, like I said, the whole spectrum, right? So when I first started, it was super casual, fishnets, just for fun, chugging beers at halftime, that kind of a thing. And then I've gotten to do all sorts of stuff. I was on Team Canada, I got to do that. I played with the men's league for a while as well. So all these dudes are all my teammates, and we get to play super competitive. And then I also get to go to you go on trips. We go to Vegas every year and just play for fun. it's super great. I mean, like just the whole rainbow.
From the Broadcast Center at BCIT's Burnaby Campus, this is All Talk Radio. You're listening to 1680 The Crow.
Good afternoon. My name is Seamus Page, and these are your news headlines to 1 o'clock. The Amber Alert for the child who had been taken from BC Children's Hospital on Monday has been cancelled. Fevan Correa Chantabuala was found near Calgary at 6 a.m. alongside Jenny Chantabuala. The 3-year-old child is currently being attended to back at BC Children's Hospital, and the mother has been taken into custody. The BC government is looking to seize millions of dollars in property from Blue Door, a dispensary in the downtown east side. The government alleges that the couple that owned Blue Door illegally possessed and sold cannabis, as well as failed to declare taxable income and possessed and used a forged document. They also asked the court to order the properties turned over to the province, as well as any interest and profits that had been earned since their purchase in 2015. A junior hockey team in the Kootenay region has been fined and placed on probation after investigation into alleged hazing. The Kootenay International Junior Hockey League posted a statement citing disciplinary measures against the Crescent Valley Thundercats. The team's captain and alternate have been suspended for 12 and 6 games respectively. All team members will be required to do training to identify and handle instances of bullying, harassment, and abuse. League Commissioner Jeff Dubois says the measures show their zero-tolerance policy for these instances. The Canadian lobster and crab harvesters are pushing back against the red list of seafoods to avoid. This is a reaction to a report by the California-based Seafood Watch. The report says that lobster and crab fishing are a menace to North Atlantic right whale, as they are getting tangled in the fishing gear. However, Executive Director of the Lobster Council of Canada, Jeff Irvin, says the red listing doesn't take into account the efforts made by harvesters to avoid this. Hurricane Fiona is hitting the Turks and Caicos after a Category 3 storm. This comes after it devastated Puerto Rico, leaving many without access to electricity or running water. The U.S. National Hurricane Center says the storm's eye passed close to Grand Turk, the capital, and the government has put a curfew in place. They are warning people to steer clear of flood-prone areas as the storm could raise sea levels 5 to 8 feet above normal. Fiona has been recorded with winds up to 115 miles per hour, and the storm is likely to increase into a Category 4 hurricane as it approaches Bermuda on Friday. The Director of Latin America and Caribbean Programs at the Americas, Brenda Rivera Garcia, says that they are ready to help as soon as possible.
In the metropolitan area, it's mostly urban flooding, but the southern part of the island is the one, and the western and eastern southern parts, they received a lot of rain. So we're still waiting for some of that flood, some of those flood waters to recede.
UN General Secretary Antonio Guterres delivered his State of the World speech today. This marks the opening of the 77th UN General Assembly. Guterres emphasized in his speech that the issues that the world faces today must be solved through cooperation.
Ukraine and the Russian Federation, with the support of Turkey, came together to make it happen, despite the enormous complexities, the naysayers, and even the hell of war. Some might call it a miracle on the sea. In truth, it is multilateral diplomacy in action.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau also arrived in New York for the General Assembly. He was joined by a host of senior ministers, officials, and diplomats. This included Bob Rae, who in a statement said that Canada needs to be more engaged and an active partner for finding solutions. This followed Guterres' speech about the state of the world.
The problem we face is this incredible cascade of crises, which the Secretary General provided the list. But in addition to providing the list, we have to provide the hope, and we have to provide a sense that we can take the human footsteps to make a difference.
4 separatist leaders of Russian-controlled regions in Ukraine are planning to hold referendums this week to become part of Russia. The votes will be held on Friday in the Luhansk, Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, and Donetsk region. This comes on the heels of Russia slowly losing ground since the day of their initial invasion 7 months ago. Right now, it is 17 degrees and clear. Today is expected to be sunny and clear all day with a high of 22 and a low of 12 tonight. For the rest of the week, it is expected to be sunny until Friday, where we can expect some rain. This has been your 1 o'clock news update. I'm Seamus Page with 1680 The Crow.
Stay tuned for more on BCIT's 1680 The Crow.